Guys, today we're going to be talking about swords, and most recently, the changes that swords have undergone. I know, everybody's talking about zoom and damage fall off, they're trying out new exotics, but among all of those sandbox changes were the changes to swords in which they had their guard function and perks completely overhauled. Bungie seems intent on making sword guard more useful, since anybody that's used swords in Master or even Legend content knows the result has always been mixed at best. To that end, a successful rework would need to accomplish two goals here. First, it'll need to provide better damage mitigation, and second, make that mitigation less punishing. So the question we want to answer today, did Bungie succeed? Are swords finally back in the meta? Let's dive in. Now, Sword Guard's first major change is the charge rate stats. Prior to update 7.2.0.1, Sword Guard passively charged its energy while not in use, but its rate was quite low. Now there is a short delay after exiting guard before charging begins, but the rate itself is significantly faster. In fact, if you add the new cooldown to the charge rate itself, it's still faster to go from 0 energy to full than before the rework. Both the delay and the rate are governed by the charge rate stats. At 0, the delay is 2.7 seconds, while the charge rate itself is right around 1. Higher stats can bring that all the way down to a 1.05 second delay with charge rates under half a second. That being said, charge rate is typically a very low stat, with guard perks making little difference here. Caster frames like Temptation's Hooked or Solar Scar roll around 50 charge rate on average, but other frames average closer to 20. Now, the second change is a major improvement to the effectiveness of the guard, governed by the guard resistance stat. Resistance is exactly what it sounds like. The amount of incoming damage reduced by guard's directional shield. At a 0 resistance stat, players will receive an 82.5% damage reduction in PvE and a 52.5% reduction in PvP. At 100, it actually goes up to a whopping 95% damage resist in PvE and 65% inside of PvP. Now, the third major change is to the guard endurance stat. You see, previously guarding against damage would slowly consume guard energy, but that penalty has been removed. Additionally, the duration itself has been increased across the board. At 0 endurance, guard can be held for just over 2 seconds. At around 90, it can be held all the way up to 8.5 seconds. And at 100, it's infinite. Granted, it's a rarity, more on that later, but because there's no charge being consumed for guarding, the guard efficiency stat has also been removed. Now finally, heavy attacks can be triggered even if sword energy is lower than the cost for a full attack, whereas previously this was not the case. Now, with all that being said, what does that really mean? Bungie is really trying to increase the flexibility and viability of build crafting with your swords by placing greater emphasis on things like charge, resist, and endurance stats. And again, on paper, Bungie appears to have made sword guard less costly, and on top of that, more effective. Now, there are currently 6 guard perks available in game. You've got Balance, Burst, Enduring, Heavy, Sword Master, and Infinite. Now, thanks to another quality of life improvement, we can now clearly see exactly the impact each perk has on sword stats. If you head on over to the Enclave, you can hover over each guard perk and see for yourself, but we summarize them for you all on screen. Basically, swords have 0 resist and endurance stats by default, meaning those values are set entirely by guard perks. Now, given how focused and important these stats are now, it's clear that when chasing rolls or crafting, that you need to know what perk you want. If you're looking to eat big damage, go for Burst Guard. If you're looking for a longer duration, Enduring Guard. Best of both worlds, Heavy Guard. Uniquely, Sword Master's Guard adds 30 to charge rate and is the only perk that improves this stat at all. Now, Infinite Guard is rare, only appearing on a handful of swords in the game, offering 100 endurance, which doesn't deplete guard charge at all. Infinite clearly isn't an exaggeration here, at the cost of significant damage resistance. Now, all these changes combined not only improve how effective Sword Guard is as a risk mitigation tool, but also provide more control to players in understanding which sword frames and perks they should be chasing. And I would say for years, sword discourse has basically been Lament, Whirlwind Blade, and Eager Edge. Now there's a lot more to consider, but does this mean swords are actually better? The answer? Kind of. Understand, guys, a lot of these changes are like quality of life changes to swords. It's not an overall meta shifting change. It's Bungie's way of saying, hey, we know you get stomped the hell and back when you try to use swords in Grandmaster Nightfalls. Now you have a means of survivability. There just aren't that many high-level PvE encounters where big, sustained melee damage is advantageous. Again, nothing seems to really be helping in the damage department. These changes are great though if you're trying to get to safety or absorb a knockback from a ground slam, which I do like, but concentrated fire from adds, just adds, will still shred your health bar with a low resistance sword. And you can spec into high resist, but keep in mind, the trade-off to duration is steep. So sure, you can safely move in, but how much damage you will get off before you need to get the hell out of there? Heavy guard may be the thing that splits the difference with high resist and endurance. But at that point, you're gonna be asking yourself, why not just use a ranged heavy weapon with less risks? Now finally, we need to talk about the special ammo elephant in the room. The rework of sword guard was largely spurred by the effectiveness of glaives. Bungie has gone on record saying that glaive usage isn't very high, but the skill ceiling absolutely is. The reason is simple. Glaives offer 97.5% damage resist across the board in PvE and 50% inside of PvP. Sure, glaive guard charge isn't free. It requires landing range hits in order to provide that shield. And the moment you reload, this opens you up and makes you vulnerable to damage again. Or of course, until you run out of charge. Now this is offset by perks like replenishing Aegis, magazine or loader mods to reduce shield downtime. All of this with higher damage resistance, requiring a lower ammo cost while freeing up your heavy slot for any heavy ammo weapon you desire. Not everybody vibes with glaives, but their value proposition still puts the sword guard in a tough position. Now there are exceptions to this rule. Our recent review of Roline Zero highlights its excellent performance after a recent rework. And it also has the infinite guard perk intrinsically. The Lament is also still a damage powerhouse, and despite not receiving changes to the charge rate to preserve its loop of guard, light attack, heavy, it still benefits from better guard resistance and duration. These exotics are absolutely improved by these changes and will likely continue to excel in their roles. But are they the new standard or are they the exception? It depends. They're definitely still going to be some of the best choices for utilizing swords, but it all depends on where and how you want to use a sword. In some places, the exotics may be your best choice, and in others, it may be better to just change to one of the legendaries. Which takes us to the aspect every sword user needs to be using, Banner of War. Now its description states, defeat a target with a melee attack, finisher, or sword to raise a Banner of War that pulses with energy, periodically healing nearby allies and increasing melee and sword damage. And targets defeated by you and nearby allies charge the banner, increasing the speed of its pulses. Now the increase to sword damage here is only 10%, nothing crazy, but still a perk in our subclass that directly buffs our sword damage. On top of that, it's very easy to proc. All you need to do is get a melee sword or finisher kill, and suddenly you have free healing and free damage. And the upkeep for Banner of War is very simple. Simply you and your allies in the near vicinity just simply needs to get kills. This aspect is very strong. We've already gone over it with a few other builds, Monte Carlo especially, but this now takes us to our sword builds. What kind of gear would you need to run with something like Banner of War? To start with your sword of choice, you have three main choices: Roline Zero, Lament, and Throne Cleaver. The exotic swords, Roline Zero and Lament, are both great options for your sword slot. Lament is great, as its combo can allow for both solid burst DPS and total damage per combo. At Carl, its main combo of guard, 3 light attacks, and 1 heavy attack did a total of 273,689 damage. Now the healing provided by its combo is also really nice, and it's especially nice in in-game content. Now Roline Zero and its buff to its heavy attack last season has also made it a very strong contender. For those who missed it, Roline Zero now gets a second heavy attack when activating Temporal Sprint. Unfortunately, since Temporal Sprint still requires full sword energy to proc, it can't take advantage of the heavy attack change. Still though, it's a fantastic sword that puts out outrageous burst damage in a really quick amount of time. At Carl, base Roline Zero was hitting for 119,350 damage per Temporal Sprint heavy attack, or 238,700 damage per Temporal Sprint heavy combo. Now this is less than what Lament hits at base, but when Assassin's Blade is procced, Roline's damage is buffed by 15%. Now this brings one Temporal Heavy to 137,255 damage, and the Temporal Heavy combo to a whopping 274,510 damage. Just barely beating out Lament in the end. Now finally, we have Throne Cleaver, arguably the most iconic sword to pair with Titan, given that it's a class exclusive sword, and it's a pretty great sword to begin with. But the main reason we bring it up is because how it works with the changes to sword heavies. Since you can now use a full powered heavy attack with any non-zero amount of energy, you could technically chain 2 heavy attacks one after another. All you have to do is start your first heavy from the air. It'll only eat a portion of your sword energy, and now you can follow that up with a grounded heavy. Now Using something like Jagged Edge, On Guard, and a spec mod, Throne Cleaver's first heavy attack does 144,403 damage, and its second hits for 111,079 damage. This brings us to a total of 255,482 damage. Now doing the same, but with Vorpal instead of On Guard, Throne Cleaver hits for 122,187 damage per heavy, hitting for 244,374 damage. Now with this new second heavy, Throne Cleaver's potential damage has been massively improved. It does more than Worldline 0 at base, and while it can't beat out Worldline with Assassin's Blade or Lament, it's very much worth considering since it puts out similar damage numbers without taking up your exotic slots. Now what about your choice of exotic armor? Here guys, it really depends. Banner of War gives you some solid healing, but if you're using Lament, you might not even need to build into any of your sword defenses. If you're using Worldline or Throne Cleaver and want something extra to build into your sword defenses, then look no further than Strongholds. Strongholds comes with the exotic perk Clenched Fist, stating that it maximizes guard stats on equipped swords. You take reduced damage while blocking with a sword, and rapidly damaging targets after blocking shots with a sword grants restoration for a duration determined by the number of shots blocked. Now this exotic was built entirely for the purpose of helping to enhance your swords. The maximized defenses and damage resistance while blocking with a sword will also help you even more than these new sword changes already do. And the restoration granted after blocking shots and hitting an enemy could be the perfect thing you need to keep yourself alive, either while Banner of War is down, or if you need extra healing and in-game activities. Again, this exotic was made for swords. So if you're looking for a way to enhance your build with near invincibility while guarding, extra healing, infinite guard duration, then this is the exotic for you. Now in terms of armor mods, there's nothing too crazy besides your normal siphons, surges, etc. One mod that will really benefit you here is Lucent Blade, which is found on your chest piece. Lucent Blades increases the energy charge rate on your swords, which isn't a necessity, but definitely a nice quality of life mod to have. Otherwise, you could just run something like resist mods to help you stay alive. So to wrap everything up, guys, swords are better. Maybe not in the meta way that we want it. Like I remember way back when Energy Accelerant was doubling the damage on some of our favorite swords, Throne Cleaver included. I love that time. We are not at that level. I wish we were. But with the inclusions of Banner of War for that extra damage and survivability, with the rework here to guard, adding more to survivability, with certain perks on swords also becoming more valuable, there is a way to make swords work for my sword enthusiasts out there. Bungie has succeeded in making sword guard more valuable. And in this case, I feel like some of our legendary swords have become more viable. But something that Bungie mentioned a long time ago about machine guns. They said because machine guns have such good ammo economy, they don't want machine guns being the overall DPS meta. And I feel like in some ways, given the ease of use that swords have and its ammo economy, that's kind of the route Bungie's trying to go there, leaning us more into survivability rather than giving us a DPS powerhouse. So guys, let me know in the comments below what you think. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.